Donald Trump is a horrible, narcissistic, selfish, racist, sexist, warmongering president, but that doesn't mean we should believe the CIA about him. Real quick, I want to go over some themes that liberals have been pushing about Donald Trump colluding with Russia to win the 2016 presidential election. Back in December 2016, the Washington Post, New York Times, and others reported that anonymous figures within the CIA said there was a consensus that Russia had actually worked not just to cast doubt on the integrity of the American democratic process, but to actually help Donald Trump to win. Now, these didn't have sources, these didn't have names, these didn't have information, but liberals ran with it. And I want to use one example in particular that's emblematic. Now, it's not all liberals and it's not only liberals, but I want to use one example in particular that's emblematic of it. David Futrell at We Hunted the Mammoth, a blog that covers misogyny and racism online. Now, I read his blog a lot, and I was a big fan of his. I thought his take was so interesting on just covering and usually reporting without a huge amount of commentary because it was so absurd misogyny online, such as men going their own way, red pill, manosphere, men's rights activists, alt-rightists, guys like Paul Elam, whatever you want to call them, all these groups that basically would smear women and vilify them online. However, I had a problem with what he did in December 2016. He took the Washington Post story and just ran with it. In other words, there was no corroboration, there was no outside evidence, there was no transparent inquiry. He just said, it's official, Russia helped win the election for Trump. Now, so what, you may ask? What's the big deal about that? Well, it assumes a lot about the CIA. It sort of shows a picture that one has in which the CIA are reputable, honest, they're us, we feel kinship with them, they're part of America, therefore we have a reverence for them and defer to them. They've sacrificed people, lost lives in defense of America, and so it feels good and it is very easy to believe that the CIA proves that Donald Trump, who is a horrible, horrible president, and who may get us involved in nuclear war, and Vladimir Putin is a brutal, vicious dictator who's enriching himself at the expense of Russia and committing war crimes. But wait a minute, if committing war crimes, assassinating people, and violating people's rights means that Vladimir Putin's not trustworthy, that should mean the CIA is not trustworthy as well. I'm bringing this up with David Futrell specifically just to be emblematic of someone I tried to engage on this topic, and he really sort of wasn't forthcoming with me on what his thoughts were. He would sort of scatter and like go over here with an argument, go over there. I don't have the tweet, I couldn't find it, I looked it up. For whatever reason, I can't pull it up on Google, so you have to believe me. I was engaged with him on Twitter about this a few months ago. I said, well, what about the CIA claiming that weapons of mass destruction were in Iraq? They helped build a case for Iraq that was completely false. George Tenet, the CIA director, said it was a slam dunk case to make that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. David Futrell replied that that's because George Bush was a shitty president. Now, that's dishonest. It's not dishonest that George Bush was a horrible president and invaded Iraq when there was absolutely no justification for it. It's dishonest because it's painting a picture. He's making a selective presentation of history in which the CIA is only wrong when there's a bad president, but otherwise they're okay. Now, the CIA doesn't just come and go with each presidency. There are people who are there for a long time and they stay a long time after the president goes and the next president's elected. Not only that, people from the CIA may work in different parts of the government in high-ranking positions, or they may go from those positions to the CIA. Now, if you have a little bit of understanding of the history of the CIA, you would say, wait a minute, we can't necessarily trust them just because they're our guys, allegedly. They're in our country. We look up to them to protect us, that they actually do a lot more than just merely analyze intelligence, which is what they're supposed to be doing. Again, I confronted David Futrell with this and said, is it not on your conscience at all that the CIA has been involved in toppling governments and funding death squads? He said, where did I say I approve that? Now see, that's again dishonest. In that specific, in a narrow respect, he's right. He never explicitly said he approves it. But what did he actually do? He created the picture of a CIA that's trustworthy. On their word, he believed it's official. On his website, he said, it's official. Vladimir Putin helped Trump win the election, and he didn't even need evidence. He went flailing like a little kid with this screaming like, we got it, it's official. It was almost cartoon-like in how much of a parody it was of somebody who's supposed to be skeptical. I said it was disgusting of him to use this Russia-phobia to believe the CIA. And he said basically it's not Russia-phobia to have suspicion about Putin, who's a dictator. Again, being dishonest. All it really shows is this. He has a bias for the CIA because there's no actual reason to put forward to believe the CIA in this. And when I say bias, I realize that word gets thrown around way too much. We all have biases. What I mean is a feeling of affinity, an unconscious deference and respect and reverence for this institution when there's no reason for it. It's just like believing what you see in news and movies, that the US are presented as the good guys and they're shot in these big hero shots with the music playing behind them, and they're cut together to look like they're powerful and plotted so that the USA is righteous. That's all it is. Because if you actually look at the history of the CIA, they're every bit as bad as Russia under Putin. They're every bit as bad as really the KKK if you want to get into other issues that David Futrell talks about, like white supremacy, neo-Nazis, white nationalism, white separatists. They've killed way more brown people than the KKK ever could. Now, that's partly because they have a lot more resources. Granted, the KKK probably would have done that too. But yet, look how skeptical he is of Putin, but he has no reason apparently to be skeptical of the CIA. And that's just really selfish. It's self-serving. It's saying, I'm going to believe them because it flatters my point of view. I'm not going to be skeptical, and that's really when you should be skeptical, is especially when something is flattering and confirms your beliefs and you don't have strong evidence for it. You have to question it even more than that and ask yourself, how do I know? And if it was so official and David Futrell's not engaged in Russia-phobia, why'd he even call for an investigation at the end of his article? Why does he keep calling for them while also smearing Trump as a traitor and treasonous? If he's going to do that, it seems that he already has the answers, but an investigation means you're still searching for answers. So which is it? And it also betrays a little bit of the belief that the Democratic Party and Hillary Clinton were great, good. We don't need to fundamentally change the government that they were involved with for so long, that bombing poor Arab countries, having sanctions on them, spying on Muslims, profiling them here in America, those aren't serious problems because at least with Hillary and Obama they could be trusted. It's with a Republican you don't want to have those powers. That's when it's bad. But the CIA conducting covert wars under Obama, doing signature strikes and targeted killings, bombing people at funerals, at weddings, civilians, that's sort of, at least he's a smart guy you can respect, and he conducts himself with dignity and grace. So it's really a pardoning and whitewashing of the government's history and the CIA's role in killing lots of people. Again, it shows the unconscious bias of America's good. If you're in the in-group, you're good. If you're out of the in-group, you're bad. So why be suspicious of Putin, which you absolutely should be? He is a horrible murderer and torturer, but not be suspicious of the CIA. There's no reason. All it is it's a feeling, a sense of self-righteousness, of reverence for the CIA, of deference to them. Oh, they must be the good guys, and Donald Trump's guilty of treason, but let's do the investigation too at some point. When you keep throwing around accusations you don't have evidence for, it may severely overplay your hand, and you keep switching cards you're playing from, like, Trump won because of this card. Oh, it didn't work? Okay, maybe this one, maybe this one. Well, yeah, it's not Russia-phobia, even though I have a picture of Putin looking coy over a fire. It's just, I'm suspicious of him. But the CIA, no, I'm not going to question them, but I'm not also defending them either. You keep playing different cards, and it's really dishonest. And I used to respect David Futrell a lot more, but now it seems like he doesn't care about that. He doesn't care about being honest and playing his hand full out. He could at least be honest with me. Now, granted, Twitter is not conducive to long conversations, so I'm not trying to take cheap shots at him, but he could have said, I understand the CIA does that, but I'm willing to sort of overlook it in this instance because I believe there's good evidence for it. He couldn't even say that. I don't think he really understands the point, and that's being generous. I'm pretty sure he doesn't understand the point of why trusting the CIA is so bad, because ultimately this is like a pardoning of the US government and the Democrats for their policies as well. It's like saying it's not the Democrats' fault and Hillary Clinton's fault that they were a horrible party and had a horrible candidate who made war, who got millions from banks, who spoke only in platitudes about say Black Lives Matter and women's rights, and ultimately would change her position over the years depending on what was convenient. She supported the Iraq War and now sort of backs off it like, oh, it was a mistake, but I sort of didn't understand the vote I was making for the Iraq War, even though she argued for it on the Senate floor, and you can see that footage. So she deserves another chance. It's okay. She's trustworthy starting now. It's really a way of pardoning Democrats from looking at your own party and actually analyzing what made you lose, because you can just blame a foreign enemy and vilify them. And granted, Russia may not be innocent. They actually may have done some of these things they were accused of, or all of them, or a number of them. But it needs an open, transparent investigation, not a Benghazi-like hysteria witch hunt where you actually overlook serious issues, as Republicans did, the killing of people and tribal leaders in Libya, which I also talked about with my interview with John Kiriakou, a link to that below. But instead, they just focused on the angle that only benefited Republicans, which is that Hillary Clinton was weak and therefore we needed a Republican Secretary of State. It's dishonest, it's self-serving, and it's not just foreign countries that the CIA is engaged in toppling, and it's not just foreign countries where the CIA is engaged in malpractice. They do it here. They lied to John Kiriakou, again, and other CIA officials, saying that the terror suspect in Pakistan, Abu Zubaydah, was captured, waterboarded once, and he gave good intelligence. That was the story. It turns out that was a total lie. They waterboarded him 83 times, and I'll take Christopher Hitchens' word for it that waterboarding is torture after he did it. That it doesn't simulate drowning, it is drowning. And not only they waterboarded him 83 times, they didn't get any good evidence out of him. The CIA lied about that. They lied about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. But oh, they're trustworthy now when they float an anonymous story where it's so obvious, if that's the pattern you see, of them lying for decades, not just under George Bush, David Futrell, that they actually have their own reasons that we don't always understand for floating theories, for disinformation that benefits them because they're like their own government within our government. They're going to outlast Donald Trump. They can play nice with the next president if they want, if they like that president. And they were there long before Trump. So you can play games and pretend and pardon yourself of thinking that something is fundamentally bad about what the CIA does around the world. Or you can say, well, they're trustworthy, I believe them, they're good. And just to really drive home the point of what I'm saying about the CIA's malpractice around the world, here's a quick list of some of the CIA abuses they've committed, which also involve millions dead. So just to sum up, Look at context, look at history, question whether something flatters your belief system, as I have to do with mine constantly. This is not a natural fit for me. I always have to sort of question, how do I know this? Can I really responsibly believe this? And in good conscience, can I pardon myself from the task of looking this up and really confirming this? Because what people like David Futrell are doing and Joy Ann Reid is just dishonest, and it's deceitful, and it's in bad conscience. Because not only are you merely acting like the CIA is good, which they are not, but you're also, they do every horrible thing you can imagine that Putin does on some level or some variant of it. Secret prisons, torture sites, killing prisoners, arresting people without charge, bombing civilians, toppling governments, assassinating leaders, installing dictators, funding and training death squads to commit genocide. Oh, but I'm suspicious of Putin. I don't know about that guy. CIA, I believe him right away. Don't say I support them. I don't support them, just I believe them. And somehow their credibility isn't shot with me without outside corroborating evidence. So here's my advice to David Futrell specifically. And again, I'm not trying to take cheap shots, but I'm trying to say this as a challenge to you and people like you. Stop being so selfish. Stop only believing what flatters you and makes Trump out to be even worse, which I was inclined to believe all that stuff too, and I'm still inclined to believe it. I just need evidence. There are connections to Russia. Paul Manafort, Jeff Sessions. But we need actual investigations and not witch hunts. And by the way, David Futrell, it's really dishonest to do the who me. It's not McCarthyism when we do it. When I said you're using McCarthyite tactics, and you said, what? That's bizarre. It's only McCarthyism when it's used against left-wingers. Yeah, so smearing people as agents of Russia is okay, and it's not McCarthyite, as long as you're doing it against right-wingers. Okay, well, as long as Democrats take that view, you're going to keep losing elections and lose credibility, and you're not even going to appear like you care about the integrity of elections. You care about yourselves and your party. I know the fact that alleged information coming from the CIA feels comfortable and familiar because we know them, we hear about them regularly. But you have to question, does that make sense? How do you know? Or is that another unconscious bias? And by the way, it is really ugly and hypocritical for someone like David who has a blog against racism, and yet you buy into this white supremacist unconscious bias of the in-group Americans are good, but if it happens to the out-group, it's not going to get my attention as much. I don't worry about it as much. I don't care, and therefore it's not going to affect how I view the CIA. Now, we all have unconscious biases. We all need to challenge and question ourselves. We're all guilty of that. Really owe it to yourself to meet that challenge. So let me know what you think. I hope this video gave you some good information. And let's all wonder, how many dictators does the CIA have to support and prop up and install before we'll say, oh, they're not trustworthy either?